I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club. And how is everybody?
Everybody's fine, I think. I'm fine.
I'm great.
We haven't really had too much going on. The weather hasn't cooperated here in Maryland.
I know, it won't snow.
I don't want it to snow. I want 60-degree weather, but I'm not getting it.
Well, if it's going to be cold, it should snow because it's pretty. And when I look out my window, and since our last small snow event, it's nice to see all the yuck covered up in pretty whiteness. Maryland is it's hard to predict our weather. We have too many elements. We got the mountains to the west, we got the ocean to the right, to the east.
Chesapeake Bay in the middle.
So it's very volatile.
Tracy and I went to an event at one of the local libraries. We did a Meet the Author evening. We met with John Didakis. He was a senior copy editor for CNN for 25 years.
Under Wolf Blitzer.
Among others. And he has written a series of mysteries. We will be having him on an episode next month, I believe, or the month after. And we're looking forward to that. If you check your library's schedule, they do have a lot of events that you can attend, usually for free, and there's a lot of opportunities that you miss if you're not aware of what's going on. That's my recommendation. And Kathy, did you do anything exciting for your birthday?
I went to the George Peabody Library, which is a beautiful library in the heart of Baltimore City. They had a really interesting program. It's a series, actually. This was the third in the series. I hadn't heard about the first two. I will definitely look out for the next in the series. Based on the rare books that have what they call four-edge painting on the sides. You'd have to see it. They're really wonderful examples of the imagination that you can find in books, and not only in the stories, but the actual printed books themselves. This was a musical interpretation of hidden and secret codes in books. So that was really a fantastic event.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
It was. I would have liked to have looked at the books themselves. We'll see what happens next in the series.
That's great. Well, today we have an interview with Peggy Townsend, all the way from California. She wrote the book, See Her Run,
which is part of the Aloa Snow Mystery Series.
Peggy Townsend is an award-winning newspaper reporter who has covered stories from street kids to serial killers, and once chased an escaped murderer through a graveyard at midnight. She talks about that in the interview. She is also the author of See Her Run, which was called one of 13 thrillers to keep you up at night by Kirkus Reviews, while a review in the Washington Post called See Her Run a superb debut with sophisticated plotting and an intense character study. Her second mystery in the series, The Thin Edge, will be released by Thomas and Mercer May 14th. She is a runner and a downhill skier who also works part-time for UC Santa Cruz as a writer.
Wow, she's a busy lady.
Yes, she is.
And stay tuned for our interview with Peggy. We are very pleased to welcome to our podcast Peggy Townsend, who is the author of the book See Her Run. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be talking to you.
First, my question is, please tell us the Brain Farm is based on real individuals. We need people like that in the world.
That's wonderful. It's a very interesting story, and the answer is kind of yes and no. So the Brain Farm originally wasn't going to be part of the book. I was up doing research in San Francisco, and I stopped in at this kind of funky coffee shop. As a reporter, I'm used to talking with people, and so I sat down next to these three white-haired guys who started telling me all these stories stories about San Francisco and murders that had happened and conspiracy theories, and I just fell in love with them. I walked out the door and I said, they have to be in my book. The Brain Farm isn't based exactly on them because I live in Santa Cruz most of the time, and that town is known for having really deep roots in the 60s. And I know a lot of guys just like the Brain Farm, you know, activists, monkey wrenchers, and they're just wonderful. They're smart and they're rebellious, and it's a yes and a no. It's based on those three guys in the coffee shop, but also just my experience with a variety of people like that.
Well, they just were so entertaining in the book. And even though you say they almost weren't in there, I bet you're really glad you included them.
Oh, I am. I love the Brain Farm. It's a strange thing that as a writer, your characters become real people to you. And so I'm glad the Brain Farm's in my world as well.
Yes, they're great.
Well, when you first introduced them, I wasn't quite sure how they were going to work out in the novel. I kind of thought they were going to be these off-the-wall conspiracy theorists. I really liked the way you developed them.
Well, thank you. I sort of wanted them to be the kind of people that question authority, question everything, because I think that's a great trait to have and that we need more of these days. And so they just kind of evolved into that as someone that just questioned everything.
And they helped with the climax of the story as well.
And they're in my next book as well.
Awesome.
It's called The Thin Edge, and they play a big role in that book as well.
Good.
The protagonist of your mystery series is named Aloa Snow, and I wondered what prompted you to name her after that species of moth.
Well, that was another happy accident. I was mulling the story in my mind. I was kind of thinking about it, working it out, kind of getting the character in my head. I was thinking of the word aloha. I typed it into a search, and I left the H out, so it was Aloha. And I said, you know, I love the sound of that word. So I typed in Aloha, and I hit images, and up came this picture of this beautiful moth. It was white with these red lines on its wings and black spots, and it was Aloa lactinae, as I believe how you say it. And I said, I love it. I love that image of that moth. It's beautiful, strong. It's also very slender, and as you know, my main character was an anorexic and is always kind of battling the desire to restrict and control her body. I just looked at it and said, that's it. That's how that happened.
Those happy accidents are wonderful.
They certainly are.
Now, you seem to have a first-person knowledge with the anorexic aspect of the story. Can you discuss any of that?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. It's not a major part of the book, but it's just part of her background. I'm a newspaper reporter. I've been a reporter for a long time, and I had done a couple of stories, one with a woman who was an anorexic and another with a young man who was an anorexic. I talked to them, and they really took me deeper into their life and how they felt and their emotions. For them, it was a lot about control. It was a lot about their life was out of control. They felt like they could bring it in and have the ability to affect what was going on in their life because they could affect what they put into their mouth and what they ate. And I like that idea of a woman who is talented. These people I talked to, they were smart, they were high achievers. And I like that idea of having a character who needed to be in control. So there was that basis there. As a reporter, I also interviewed Jane Smiley. And one of the things she told me is, when I asked her how she wrote some of the dramatic scenes in her book. And she said, like, you take a small event and then you blow it up. So, for instance, you're in the department store and all of a sudden you lose sight of your young child for a moment, and that feeling of panic until you find them again. You take that feeling of panic and blow it up if you wanted to write about a child kidnapping. I actually had to fast for a medical procedure. And I thought, oh God, I'll never be able to do it. I did. And the weird thing was, I really got into it. Not eating for 24 hours. I felt light. I felt like I had great ideas. I was fasting, basically. And it kind of gives you this euphoria. After the procedure was done, I kept fasting because I was totally into it. And I went, uh-oh, this is not good. And also I was starting to feel bad at that point. So I took that tiny feeling of euphoria, control, and just expanded that into Aloha. into the character. And I also did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading about anorexia as well.
Well, I think you did a great job of capturing it. I love the fact that Aloa was multifaceted. She was good at what she did. She had some flaws, and it just really made her human.
Thank you. Thank you. She's a very real character in my mind, as well as the brain farm.
How much research did you have to do into adventure sports and nutrition? And are the supplements you discussed fictitious or real?
Well, I am sort of a mini version of an adventure athlete myself. And also my son is a professional big mountain skier. So I sort of know that world. I've rafted rivers. I rafted the Salmon River, the Colorado River, the Rogue River, the Stanislaus. I've done a little bit of rock climbing in the Owens River Canyon. I've gone into a cave. I ski. I don't do anything like kind of big scale, but I kind of understand that thrill of pushing yourself, going into the wilderness and pushing yourself. So I know that world. Also, because I know it, and because I know a lot of professional athletes and adventure athletes, I was always kind of bugged by the food supplements and the drinks that supposedly like give you energy and make you perform better. And it bothered me that you were taking something that was so healthy, being outdoors, and introducing a chemical saying, if you use this, you can be better. All the athletes I know, what they do is they eat well, they work out, they get good sleep. So it bothered me about this idea of pushing to people that, oh, if you drink this, you'll be a better athlete, or if you take this, you'll be stronger. That sort of came from my life and the research I did into that kind of world. There are also supplements similar to kind of what I wrote about in the book, but not exactly. And once again, I used my imagination.
Well, I think that's so true. On a smaller scale, my mother-in-law saw a commercial for beet juice. And I think Mark Spitz was hawking this stuff. And she was convinced that this was going to basically be the fountain of youth and was begging us to order it for her because she doesn't know how to do anything like that. I got her some beet juice from the grocery store and she drank it once and, oh, this doesn't work.
Exactly. Roast some nice beets in the oven and have them for dinner instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, she gave it 20 minutes. Well, is the murder in See Her Run based on a true event?
No. And I'll tell you a funny story about that as well. I've made multiple research trips up to San Francisco, and my wonderful husband is my driver because I have to be looking at things and going places. We were driving down a street and I said, pull over, and jump out of the car, and I'm walking around and I come back and he says, what are you doing? Why did we stop here? And I says, because I'm looking for a place to hide a dead body. He looked at me the way anybody should look at their wife if she says she's looking for a place to hide a body. But it's all my imagination. I, like some of my other mystery writing friends, we spend a lot of time thinking about how to murder people. So it's a sad fact of mystery writers that we contemplate these kinds of things.
Well, the murder itself was very ingenious, and, they say truth is stranger than fiction, so it did make us wonder.
Well, for a long time, I was a crime and courts reporter at the newspaper where I worked. I have spent a lot of time covering murder trials, covering murders, going into prisons and interviewing killers. I do have a little bit of background in that.
Well, you say on your website in your little bio that you chased down a serial killer in a graveyard, and I want to know who that was.
That was a man named Billy Mansfield. He was a serial killer. He was from Florida, and he was arrested in our county for suspicion of killing a woman that he met at a bar. But while he was in jail, the Florida officials went and dug up the family junkyard and found 5 more women's bodies buried there. And so he was in our jail awaiting trial. And that Friday night, I was at home, and as you can tell, I had a pretty boring social life because a police officer I knew called and asked if I wanted to do a ride along with him. And I was like, sure, I don't have anything else to do. So we're out riding along and we get a call that 2 prisoners had escaped from jail. And one of them was Billy Mansfield. The officer I was with, I have to say he would make a great TV show because he kind of had this psychic ability to track down crooks. And while everyone else was heading in the direction where someone had spotted a guy running in an orange jumpsuit, we went the other way. About 2 miles away, there was a cemetery. We jumped jump out of the car, and there's a river that runs along the cemetery. So we jump out of the car, we run through the cemetery looking behind gravestones to see if the guy's hiding there, head up the river, find a footprint, start following Billy Mansfield up the river, alongside the river, until we got called back because they were going to send the dogs out to where we were. It turns out Billy was found a few hours later, wet, covered in mud, about half a mile from where we'd been. So we were right on his trail. I did chase him through the graveyard.
That's a fantastic.